Well, joining us for our Emmy Contenders Production Design panel is Dan Leigh from Godfather of Harlem. Dan, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Joyce. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, how did you get involved with Godfather of Harlem?
It as many jobs as I find many jobs happen. You don't expect it. This was completely unexpected. I got a call. It's like, can you meet? The meeting was online, but it just kind of clicked because of my love of New York, my love of shooting in New York, in particular. The history of New York, which is extremely important to Godfather of Harlem. It is very mixed up with real characters from from the mid 1960s, political, music, social, gangsters, and it's kind of a tapestry of people who live a very high life and people who really have very little, and everybody in between. And that kind of New York history is extremely important to me.
How familiar were you with Bumpy Johnson, his story, and just 63 Harlem in general?
I was familiar enough. I mean, I certainly knew who Bumpy was, and some of the other characters. American Gangster, the film American Gangster, touches on some of these characters, and Bumpy in particular was of interest because he operated in a way that was completely not the way the sort of organized crime normally handled everything. And he kind of kept them all at bay and angry with him all the time. And they were always, there was always this friction and always this competition, and ultimately very violent kind of threats. So those kinds of things certainly informed me and my desire to really get involved with the project.
Mm-hmm. I do like the look of the show. It's pretty, like you said before, you highlight like the high life, and it's not, I guess, as gritty as you might think, like a show about like, a mob boss or just the mob in general might be. It's kind of refined and polished, like his look too. So how did you go about developing that aesthetic?
Well, there's factual information about Bumpy and his wife Mamie, and at the beginning of the first season, you see him just getting out of Alcatraz, and he had been in Alcatraz for close to a decade, and while he was in Alcatraz, he made sure that envelopes of cash were provided to Mamie on a regular basis. And she, knowing he would return, kind of took that cash, and she made a life that was a life that she aspired to, and that she knew he would have to kind of, once he got back, he would have to accept it. But what's interesting about it is the building where she chose for an apartment was at the time the most beautiful, prestigious new housing in Harlem. It was, everybody wanted to live there. It had everything. It had dishwashers, and everything was kind of provided. There were terraces, and she wanted to elevate the life for her and her daughter, or it's actually Bumpy's daughter, and so she, unbeknownst to Bumpy, while he's in Alcatraz, she took the best apartment in that building, and even though that building doesn't have a penthouse, we imagine that it does have a penthouse and that that's what she went for. So it gave us the ability to show that she has been kind of using this cash to make a great living place for herself, to purchase clothing and furs and furnishings, and to make sure that the daughter was beautifully clothed, and her social life was sort of at the top level of what Harlem had at the time. So when we did the research and we put together this idea of this penthouse, and we started doing the concept sketches and some digital modeling, when that information went back to the studio, they were completely mystified because they didn't know about, this building in Harlem. And they were very surprised that the set was not, maybe 1 or 2 floors of a tenement that was probably kind of okay, but there was probably, leaks and vermin, and, that's the kind of thing that everybody expects Harlem to be in, especially in that time, which just simply wasn't the case. So there was a few days back and forth with the studio, explaining, and we actually found magazine advertisements for this building that, it may have been the first doorman building in Harlem, and brass elevators and everything else that anybody could want. And the studio came around and said, okay. And that gave us the sort of full tapestry of what Harlem was at the time, because we needed that high end in order to kind of offset the low end, which is extremely obvious and expected.
When I was watching it, I was like, I would totally live in his apartment, like that, like sunken living room, and it looks so big. And like in the finale, when he's attacked by that hitman, like there's like such great use of the space because it goes through like the kitchen and everything, and it comes back around. So did you build the whole layout of the whole apartment, like even?
The apartment is a complete build, but for the kitchen, you mentioned the kitchen. That's a good thing to discuss, because kitchens in the early 60s, there was a huge trend for these beautiful enameled metal cabinetry. And everybody wanted it, and they were solid, and they were steel, and they came in a huge range of colors, and you could, I think you could even do a custom color. And we went on the hunt to see if we could find one of these complete kitchens. And we in fact found 2, which were not quite the same color, so we had to do a little bit of tweaking. But we had to have them sent in from the Midwest, and a big cleanup, and to make them appear absolutely new and pristine. And but we did go with something that was absolutely trendy at the time, and that no one would do now. Everybody, of course, wants wooden cabinets, and but so that kitchen was completely authentic. Everything in there worked. If we didn't know at the beginning if Mamie would be cooking or not, and she did a little bit, but the oven worked, the stove worked, all the plumbing worked. Everything could function if they wrote about anything that needed a full kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's awesome. I can move in then if everything works. So
you could actually. Yeah.
Well, so the show's been new for season 2. So have you thought about any designs at all? Do you know what's going to happen in season 2, or is there anything you want to build upon from season 1?
I mean, I do know that there were some hopes about season 2. I'm not sure if COVID-19 has changed any of that, because I know that there is a request for writers and showrunners to bring shows more inside and less location work. A lot of what I understood about season 2 was probably location work. I know that there was planned, it's hinted at actually visually in the first season. There's a billboard for the World's Fair, that it's coming, to get everybody excited about the World's Fair. And I know that there was an intention to use the World's Fair for some of the second season, including the mob shaking down the construction crews at the World's Fair as part of their activity. So, but I don't know if that would continue, because that would require a lot of exterior work, and that may need to be changed. Yeah.
There'll be a lot of people too at
Yeah.
the fair. So,
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, fingers crossed you can be able to do, or we'll all be able to, get out and film again. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.